Now that we have our scene roughly set up, it's time to animate it. And I say roughly because you'll probably want to go back and do a lot of tweaking as far as your design. But for now, for time reasons, we have to move on and keep going. So we're not going to spend too much time tweaking the design. We need to go ahead and start animating. To begin, what I'm going to do is just start turning off some of these layers so I can begin working with my background layer. And first thing that I want to do is use our noggies here to kind of animate on. So I'm just going to group these top two together. And if you want to rename it, you can just double click on the container. We'll call this top noggy or something like that. I'm going to use the background noggy here as our first animation. So let's say roughly around 22. This is where I want it to land. I'm going to hit set key, rewind my timeline, and move the position here off to the left. And hit set key. I'm going to turn on my top noggy, and instead of going in from the left, maybe we'll have it come in from the right. So I'll move my timeline to where I want it to land. I'll hit set key, rewind the timeline roughly, and then move the position right and hit set key. So we have our first animation. It comes in from the left and to the right. It lands in the middle of the screen. Let's go ahead and move down to our next container, these two stripes. Again, placement, color, texture, slant and stuff like that. All things you may want to adjust on your own. Our gradient here, let's have this come on some way, and we'll just hit set key there, and maybe we'll have it fly in from the left or from the right again. And we'll have that one. And let's do the same thing to the top gradient here. We'll just have it come in where we want it to land. We'll hit set key, rewind our timeline, and maybe we'll have it come in from the opposite side. We're done with that group. Now let's work on our logo. Again, the logo is made up of a couple of boxes here. So I'm just going to turn the top logo off and the top box off. This one maybe we'll have come in from the left or right side again as well. And if we want to speed things up, actually, I'm just going to group these two groups together and call it logo back and just animate these on together. So this is roughly where it's going to land and when. So rewind my timeline here, and it's going to fly in from the left side. And now I'm going to use our logo here. Instead of having that fly in, I'm just going to have it scale up again. So I'm going to set the center point to center. Roughly around 46 is where it's going to land. I'll rewind our timeline here and the scaling down to 0 and hit set key. We hit play. You can see that we have a quick animation here on this element. Now it's these parts here, so we have to decide how we want this to come in. So since we have a text BG on here, if we could just come into our container plugins and we use one of our text plugins, we can automatically set the animation for the background. I'm just going to use the TFX scale. I'm going to drag this down onto it. Let's say right around 50, maybe this will come on, and I'm going to adjust my progress percentage out to 100. And I'm going to hit set key. I'm going to rewind my timeline and take this down. And as you can see, when we take the progress percentage down, the noggy goes with it. So we hit set key, and when we go to animate this on, you can see how that affects the noggy. So if you need to make any more tweaks to it, you certainly can. Like for instance, if I would just want to add an alpha animation, depending what you're typing in there, it may not pop as much or create as much of an issue if you're very particular about your animation. So let's just add a quick alpha animation onto it as well. You can kind of see how that affected it. So I'm going to come down to the clock here and animate this one on as well. And I think I'm just going to have this scale on. So I'm going to hit make sure my axis center is set to center. So I'll just hit C for all of it. And let's say roughly right around 55 maybe. This is where it will come on. I'm going to hit set key, and then roughly somewhere it's going to scale up. So I'm just going to go ahead and adjust the scaling down to 0 and hit set key. So we'll hit play. And there you can see our clock now animates up. For our home team and visitor teams, we can have these animate on however we want. I am going to keep it simple since they are all grouped. We're going to have them just slide in from the right side. So this one's going to land maybe around 55 as well. We'll hit set key, rewind our timeline, have this fly in from the right side and hit set key. Now I'll do the same thing for our visitor. It's going to land roughly maybe around 60. I'll hit set key and we'll go to somewhere right around there and have it fly in from the right. So now we hit play. Looks like everything animates in. There may be some further tweaking that we have to do as far as design wise. So if we want to, for instance, add something like a flare as well, we'll go ahead and do that. I'll add a new group here. And let's just say here, this is our flare group. We'll go into our images here. You can use this blue flare, so I'll just drag this down and increase the Z position so that it's above our bar. Let's hit the scaling to single, and we'll scale the X out and maybe decrease the Y scale. We can move this up to wherever we want. So let's say maybe we want it right around there. And I'm going to turn my SA and TA off so we'll be able to see it better. If you want to use this expert, again, I'm going to drag the expert down onto the flare. I'm going to click on the expert, change the render mode to add, and it does give us a little bit more bump in color there. So again, if you want to make some additional tweaks, we can. I'm going to move this down a little bit, and since we will want this kind to go across the edge here, we'll need to make some animations for that. So first, what I'm going to do is group it, and I'm going to group it because I'm basically going to put two animations on it, but I want to separate one into a looping animation, and I want to separate another one into the director that is going to stop. So I'm going to add an alpha and have it fade on when the graphic comes on. So right around 55, let's say, it's going to be at 100% alpha, and let's say maybe at 25, it's going to be at 0, so it's going to fade on right around there. Now I'm going to use this group, and let's call this flare 1 pause or something like that. And I'm going to use this group here just to position it. So it doesn't matter where you start with your timeline. I'm just going to set the position roughly around there. I'm going to move it to the right hand side here and hit set key. I'm going to go ahead and click on that animation. Now, I haven't addressed anything with my directors yet, but you notice all the animations that we made went into our loop director. So we'll have to fix that in a minute. Let's go ahead and copy that flare so that we have two of them now, and they're both in the exact same spot. Since we have a position animation on that one, we can't really make the adjustment on the transformation editor on this because it already has the animation. So I'll just come into this one and maybe move the Y position down on that. If you want it at the bottom or the top or wherever you want to position it, I'm just going to kind of keep it up there. Maybe I'll scale it up a little bit on the Y, and you can see how that's going to move now when we adjust it on the X. So we're almost there. We need to do some tweaks as far as setting up our animation. So let's come back into our stage, and since we do have actually two directors, the default was created by default when we created the scene, and we have a loop director. We have a couple of things here that need to be looped, so I'm going to go ahead and loop that. Now, we already did the stripes, so we do need this flare position to loop. I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and here it is in the director. I'm going to click between the keyframes, and it brings up our loop. So I'm going to turn on loop out, and we'll want it to swing as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the infinity button. Maybe we want it to go a little bit slower so we can drag these keyframes out as well. We have another flare position here, and I want to do the same thing. I'm going to drag the keyframes out for it to go a little slower. Click between the keyframes, and here's our loop setting. I'm going to set that to infinity. So all the things that we have looping here, if I just scale out of our stage here, you see we basically have 4 animations here that should be looping. So these are the things that should be kept in this loop director. Everything else, however, is going to go into another director. So I'm going to take all the animations that don't have loops on it and drag them into that director. And here we have all of these, so I can highlight them all at once by holding down Shift and clicking, and I'm going to take them and drag it up into that default director. And to double check, we should have 2 noggies with a position, that loop, and a flare, 2 positions with loops on that. Now we have an extra animation here, the alpha, so that should go up into the other director. All right, close my directors off like that, and if we come over here to all, we'll turn that on, we'll turn that little button off so that it's always active. We hit start animation. And everything looks like it's looping, though it may be a little too fast for your speed. We can go ahead and tweak that if you need to. Now I did notice how this flare jumps back into position, so we just need to make an adjustment on that. And the bottom flare here, if we click on that animation, you can see that the loop is set, but the swing out is not. So once I turn the swing out, you can see how that changed the timeline. And again, if you wanted to slow these down, we can just drag these keyframes out a little bit. So for the Nagis, again, if we scale this out, the texture position might be a little bit too fast. So if you want to adjust the timing of it, just drag your keyframes out a little bit. And then we hit play again. You can see how this comes on, and we have our flares that are moving. We have that looping texture as well. Notice that the flares are moving at different speeds, but they're moving in the same direction. Let's reverse one of them by having it go in the other direction. So if I zoom out here a little bit, what I'm going to do is just drag one keyframe that way and the other that way. So basically I just reversed the keyframes, and now it should be going in the opposite direction. So we hit play again. You can see how the flare is now starting at the other end and going the opposite direction. All right, so we're almost there. Now we need to add some functionality of this so the graphic operator can actually start changing things out. And we need to decide what's going to be most important for them to change first. So what we're going to do is drag our control plugins, and we'll probably start with this second period. So let's go into our built-ins, into the container plugins, into the control. The first option that I want them to control is their selection or their ability to change what quarter or which period it is. So I'm going to go ahead and add a control text on to that one. I'm going to go into the field identifier, and I'm going to change this one to 1. Description is fine. I'm going to leave all these settings as is. Next will be the clock. So instead of using the control text for that, what I'm going to do is use this other control plugin called control clock. I'm going to drag this down onto our clock. I'm going to click on our control clock. I'm going to give it a field identifier of 2, since this is our second control plugin in this scene. Here it says that description is clock. That's fine. We can expose a limit. We can expose a direction. So I'm going to go ahead and turn those two on. I'm also going to put the action to set and start as well. We're going to move down to our logos and or score. So first, what I want them to be able to do is change out our team and our team score. So we're going to drag a control text onto that. That one's going to be field identifier 3. Our team score, instead of using control text, I'm going to use a control number. That way they can type a number in directly. So I'm going to drag a control number on it. This is going to be field identifier 5. I'm going to get rid of these decimal places, so there's going to be no decimal places on there that they can input. I also then want them to be able to change out the logo for the home team. So we're going to use this control image to swap that out. I'm going to click on the control image, and we're going to change the field identifier to 6. And I'm just going to leave the default settings here. If we want to change the description, probably not a bad idea. I'm going to call this one home team logo. We're going to go into the visitors here and do the same thing. So first we need to change the team name. I'm going to drag that down. This is going to be field identifier 7. I want to leave the team name as is and all the default settings as is. For the score, I'm going to use the control number again. So I'm going to slide this down. This is going to be number 8 for the field identifiers. We're going to turn the decimal places off on that again, or adjust it down to 0. We want to be able to swap out this logo as well. So again, we need a control for that. And this time the field identifier is going to be 9. Now, last thing, maybe you might want to swap out your own logo or however you're going to use this, but why not give them the option to change that as well? So in our logo here, we just have one Nagi with our logo. I'm going to drop the control image on that, and this is going to be our field identifier 10. I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and this scene is just about ready to go. What we do need to do though is to add our stop points in the stage so that we can animate this out as well. So right now it comes in, this is where I want it to land, right around the 1 second mark or 60 frames. So I'm roughly going to put my timeline there, select my default director. I'm going to add a stop point right there. This stop point only affects this director. So if I close up this director, you see that the stop point here does not affect our loop director. Now we just need to create the out animations for this. So if when you hit continue, or when the trio operator hits continue, the graphic will go out. So what I'm going to do is just quickly copy these keyframes again. I'm going to hold down C, click and drag, and each one of these is going to create an out animation. I'm not going to pay too much attention as to how fast or, particular placement of where the out animation goes. It's something you can always go back and tweak later. Just for demonstration purposes though, I'm just going to do this as quickly as I can and have everything come in and out within our scene. Okay, so I have all my keyframes copied here. We hit play, the animation comes in. You can see our looping animations are looping as well. We hit continue out and everything should go out. So this scene is pretty much all set up to go. So we're going to go ahead and hit save, move on to the next scene.